What happens when you push a saint? What happens when you corner the kindest soul in an industry built on ego, vanity, and relentless self-promotion? What happens when you take a man known not for scandals or outbursts, but for quiet generosity, a man who has given away large portions of his salary to special effects crews, who rides the subway beside ordinary commuters, who bows his head to strangers as if grateful simply to exist, and decide to turn his pain into material for a late-night comedy monologue? We are told that Keanu Reeves is the internet's boyfriend. We are told he is a Zen monk disguised as a movie star, a being of pure light floating above the petty squabbles of celebrity culture. We have seen the clips, Keanu stepping aside so a woman can sit on the subway, Keanu listening more than he speaks, Keanu smiling shyly when praised, visibly uncomfortable with applause. We have watched him be endlessly gracious to fans, humble with reporters, and infinitely patient with the absurdity of fame. Over time, the world reached a comforting conclusion: because he is kind, he must be harmless. That was the mistake, because kindness, when forged in fire, is not weakness. Silence is not surrender, and humility is not the absence of strength. What the world often forgets, what it prefers not to dwell on, is that Keanu Reeves is not kind because life was gentle with him. He is kind because life was brutal. He is a man who has walked through hell and chosen not to drag it behind him like a chain. He buried a child before that child ever took a breath. He buried the woman he loved, his soulmate, taken suddenly and violently by fate. He spent a decade watching his sister fight leukemia, standing vigil at hospital bedsides, learning firsthand how fragile hope can be. Grief did not visit him once. It moved in, unpacked its bags, and stayed. His kindness is not a default setting. It is a discipline. It is armor. It is a fortress he built stone by stone to keep the darkness from consuming him. And on a cold Tuesday night inside the Ed Sullivan Theater, someone decided to lay siege to that fortress. Stephen Colbert thought he was interviewing an actor. He thought he was going to extract a viral moment, a clip of sad Keanu, the quiet, haunted man internet culture loves to mythologize. He thought vulnerability could be teased out, packaged, and sold to boost slipping ratings. He thought the audience wanted discomfort disguised as humor, pain softened into punchlines. What he did not realize was that he was poking a dormant volcano, because beneath the calm voice and gentle eyes lives a man who has learned exactly how much he can lose and still stand. This was not supposed to be a confrontation. The producers hadn't planned for tension. They had planned for spectacle. The Late Show was struggling. Ratings were sliding, younger audiences were drifting toward TikTok clips and YouTube creators, and Colbert's once dominant presence felt increasingly outdated. The room was anxious. Executives whispered. Assistants checked phones obsessively. Everyone knew they needed a moment. Something raw, something shareable, something real. Enter Keanu Reeves. He arrived at the stage door without fanfare. No entourage. No wall of security clearing his path. Just a tall man in a slightly scuffed jacket, boots worn soft with age, his posture relaxed but observant. He thanked the staff by name when he could. He shook hands, made eye contact, smiled politely. To the casual observer, he looked like someone passing through, rather than someone about to sit under studio lights. But there was something else there too, something easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. A stillness, a gravity, the quiet confidence of someone who has already survived his worst days and therefore has nothing left to prove. The Ed Sullivan Theater, a cathedral of comedy where legends are minted and egos are polished until they gleam, felt different that night. The laughter sounded thinner, the air heavier, the kind of atmosphere that precedes a storm you don't yet know is coming. Colbert, a seasoned performer, played to the crowd as always. The jokes landed. The applause cues worked, and then the conversation drifted, subtly at first, toward grief, toward loss, toward the personal history everyone knows but rarely confronts directly. It was framed as curiosity, as depth as insight, but there is a line between asking and exploiting, and when that line was crossed, something changed. Keanu did not raise his voice. He did not storm off the stage. There was no outburst, no theatrics. Instead, he did something far more unsettling. He spoke plainly, calmly, with precision. He reminded the room, without accusation, without cruelty, that pain is not a performance, that grief is not a prop, that some things are carried quietly because they deserve reverence, not laughter, The laughter died. In that moment, the myth shattered. Not the myth of Keanu Reeves as a nice man, but the myth that niceness equals passivity. The audience witnessed something rare, a man asserting boundaries without anger, strength without cruelty, dignity without ego. Late night television did not change because someone yelled. It changed because someone refused to play along. That night, viewers didn't see an angel fall. They saw something far more powerful. They saw that even angels carry swords, and they only draw them when absolutely necessary. He stepped out of the car slowly, rain tapping against the pavement and darkening the shoulders of his worn jacket. He wore a simple T-shirt beneath it, his hair long and loose, streaked with gray that spoke not of age alone, but of a life fully lived. At 59, there was nothing polished or performative about him. He looked like a man who had weathered storms, some visible, others deeply private, and come out the other side without losing his sense of humility. A small crowd had gathered despite the rain, fans clutching umbrellas and phones, their faces lit with anticipation. He didn't hurry past them. He never did. Instead, he stopped one by one, signing autographs with care, taking selfies even as water dotted the screen of each phone. He looked people in the eye when they spoke to him. He listened, and every time he said, "Thank you," it carried a sincerity so genuine, and it almost disarmed those who heard it. There was no sense that he was indulging an obligation. It felt as though he truly meant it, every single time. Inside the studio, preparations were underway. Stephen Colbert stood in front of the mirror in his dressing room, adjusting his rimless glasses with practiced precision. He tilted his head slightly, flashing his trademark smirk, the one audiences knew well. It was the expression that silently communicated, "I'm sharper than you, but I'll graciously let you have the floor." He rehearsed it like a weapon carefully honed over years of political satire, late-night monologues, and verbal sparring with some of the most powerful figures in the world. "He's a tough nut to crack," said Chris, the producer, leaning casually against the doorframe. "He doesn't give much, very internal." Colbert didn't look up. "I'll crack him," he said confidently, checking his teeth in the mirror. "He's just shy. I'll get him to open up. We'll do the sensitive artist angle. The audience eats that up." Chris hesitated. "Just be careful. He's private." Colbert laughed, a light, dismissive laugh, the laugh of a man who had interviewed presidents, prime ministers, and cultural titans, a man who believed there was no boundary his wit couldn't cross, no silence he couldn't fill. "Private is just another word for unasked." Colbert said, "I know what I'm doing." He didn't know. Not yet. Moments later, the announcer's voice boomed through the studio. "Ladies and gentlemen, he is the one. He is John Wick. He is the man who breathtakingly stole our hearts. Please welcome Keanu Reeves." The band launched into a high-energy, jazzy rendition of a rock anthem, John Batiste leading with infectious enthusiasm. The audience erupted, not just with applause, but with something deeper. This wasn't the polite clapping reserved for celebrity guests. It was love. A wave of genuine affection rolled through the room, palpable and unforced. Keanu Reeves emerged from behind the curtain to a standing ovation. He walked with that familiar, slightly pigeon-toed gait, a little awkward, a little shy, as if he were still surprised by the reaction. He waved modestly, almost apologetically, as though the applause belonged to someone else. He bowed first to the band, acknowledging the music, then to the audience, hands pressed together briefly in gratitude. When he reached Colbert, he extended his hand. The handshake was firm, respectful, unhurried. Two men meeting, one armed with words, the other with quiet presence. "Please, please, have a seat," Colbert said, gesturing toward the guest chair. Keanu sat down carefully, crossing his legs at the ankle, hands resting loosely in his lap. He glanced out at the audience again, offering a small, appreciative smile, the kind that seemed to say, "Thank you for being kind to me." His posture was relaxed, but there was an unmistakable sense of reserve about him. Not coldness, but boundaries. Lines he did not draw with arrogance, but with intention. From the first seconds, the contrast between host and guest was striking. Colbert radiated confidence, control, and the instinct to steer the conversation wherever he pleased. Keanu radiated something rarer, calm humility, and an unspoken understanding that not every part of a person's soul exists for public consumption. As the applause finally died down, the energy in the room shifted. What looked, from the outside, like a routine late-night interview was quietly becoming something else. Two philosophies were about to collide, one that believed every story was fair game if it made good television, and another that believed silence could be just as meaningful as speech. And somewhere between the laughter, the questions, and the unasked lines, one of them would discover that not every guest could be cracked, and not every human moment was meant to be mined for viral content. It began with a gentle smile, the kind that reaches the eyes but never quite erases the sadness lingering behind them. The cameras caught it instantly, zooming in as the studio lights reflected softly off Keanu Reeves' face. He sat calmly in the guest chair, hands folded loosely in his lap, posture relaxed yet grounded, like someone fully present but never demanding attention. "Keanu, it is so good to have you back," Stephen Colbert said, leaning forward over his desk. He tapped his pen lightly, a habitual gesture he used when transitioning into what he believed would be a charming opening. "You look fantastic. Have you aged at all?" The audience chuckled on cue. "I don't think you've aged since Bill and Ted," Colbert added, flashing a grin that played well on camera. Keanu smiled again, smaller this time. "I've aged, Stephen," he replied softly. His voice was a low, steady rumble, soothing, almost musical, the kind of voice that didn't demand silence but somehow earned it. "Time comes for all of us, but I'm grateful to be here." "Grateful," Colbert repeated immediately, seizing on the word like a thread he could pull. "You use that word a lot. You're kind of famous for it. Gratitude, generosity." He tilted his head, feigning casual curiosity. "I heard you bought Rolex watches for your entire stunt team on John Wick 4. Is that true?" A murmur rippled through the audience. Keanu's eyes dropped to his hands. He shifted slightly in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the spotlight turning personal. "They took the hits," he said quietly. "I just pretend. They're the ones who bleed." "It was a small token." "A small token," Colbert echoed, raising his eyebrows theatrically. "A small token worth about $10,000 each." The crowd laughed, louder this time. Keanu responded with a polite, tight-lipped smile, the kind used to acknowledge humor without endorsing it. He nodded once, not offering anything more. The moment passed, at least on the surface. For the next 10 minutes, everything followed the familiar rhythm of a late-night interview. They talked about the physical toll of performing stunts at nearly 60 years old. Keanu spoke about training, about discipline, about respecting the limits of the body without surrendering to fear. He discussed his comic book series Berserker, explaining its themes of violence, immortality, and loneliness with thoughtful restraint. The audience listened. They laughed when prompted. They applauded at the right moments. It was safe, it was professional, it was polite, and the audience was content. But Stephen Colbert was not. Behind the desk, beneath the practiced smile and polished timing, he felt it, that creeping sense of stagnation. The energy in the room had flattened. The interview was pleasant, but pleasant didn't spike engagement metrics. Pleasant didn't get clipped, shared, dissected, and debated online. Pleasant didn't trend on Twitter. Pleasant didn't earn headlines in Variety or the New York Times. Nice was forgettable, and forgettable was dangerous. Colbert glanced toward the control room, where producers watched intently. No one said anything, but he could feel the unspoken pressure. They needed something more, a turn, a moment, some edge to justify the booking of one of Hollywood's most mythologized figures. He leaned back slightly, recalibrating. The audience sensed it too, though they couldn't have articulated how or why. The rhythm shifted just barely. The pauses grew longer. The smiles felt more deliberate. The easy banter thinned, replaced by anticipation, like the air before a storm you don't yet see on the horizon. Keanu noticed it. He always noticed. Years of navigating fame had taught him how quickly rooms could change, how curiosity could turn invasive, how admiration could slip into entitlement. He remained still, attentive, unguarded on the surface, but anchored by something deeper. He had learned long ago that you didn't need to harden yourself to remain intact. You only needed to know where your boundaries lived. Colbert adjusted his notes, then looked up again, his tone light but probing. "You know, people don't just admire you for the movies," he said. "They admire you because you're different. You're not like other stars." Keanu nodded politely, offering a noncommittal smile. "There's this idea," Colbert continued, warming to the thread, "that you're almost above it all. Ego, less immune, like nothing really gets to you. The audience leaned in. Keanu didn't interrupt. He waited. Colbert felt the opening widen. This was it, the friction he'd been searching for. The safe terrain was behind them now. Ahead lay something raw, something unpredictable, something that could either ignite the room or burn it down. From the outside, it still looked like a conversation. Two men talking under bright lights, laughter ready on standby, applause signs primed, but beneath that polished surface, the balance had shifted. The interview was no longer about promoting a project. It was about testing a myth, and neither man yet knew how far it was about to go. He glanced down at the cue cards resting in his lap, then lifted his eyes toward the producer standing just beyond the edge of the camera frame. The producer met his gaze for a fraction of a second and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The signal was clear. Go for it. Colbert shifted slightly in his chair. The movement seemed casual, but it was anything but. He reached up and removed his glasses, polishing the lenses slowly against his tie. It was a deliberate gesture, a theatrical pause meant to announce a change in tone. The playful late-night host, the man of jokes and clever banter, was quietly stepping aside. In his place emerged the interrogator. The intellectual hunter. You know, Keanu? Colbert began, sliding the glasses back onto his face, his voice measured and calm. We always talk about the stunts, the action, the physicality of your performances. He leaned forward slightly. But there's something else there, something deeper, a quality in your work that people connect with on a very emotional level. Keanu's posture shifted, almost imperceptibly. His spine straightened, his shoulders squared, not in aggression, but in alertness. A kind of melancholy, Colbert continued. Keanu paused before answering. I think, he said slowly, choosing his words with care. Characters deal with struggle. That's the nature of drama. Drama, Colbert echoed, tilting his head. Yes, but with you it feels personal. Before Keanu could respond, the giant screen behind them flickered to life. A familiar image appeared, the infamous photograph of Keanu Reeves sitting alone on a park bench, hunched slightly forward, eating a sandwich. The internet had christened it Sad Keanu. The audience responded with uneasy laughter, more reflex than amusement. Keanu glanced over his shoulder at the screen, then back at Colbert. The faint smile he had worn since walking on stage was gone. I was just eating a sandwich, Stephen, he said calmly. I was hungry. Were you? Colbert pressed, lowering his voice to a faux whisper, feigning intimacy. Or were you thinking? Keanu didn't answer immediately. You're a thinker, Colbert continued, a man who's seen the darker side of life. You've lost people, close people. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. The energy shifted so abruptly it felt physical. This was no longer a talk show. It was an interrogation room with bright lights and no exits. Keanu blinked once. His hands, which had rested loosely on his lap, clasped together tightly. I have lost people, he said quietly. We all have, but not like you, Colbert countered undeterred. Your daughter, your partner, Jennifer, your best friend, River Phoenix. He paused. That's a lot of ghosts to carry around, Keanu. The silence in the Ed Sullivan Theater was absolute. You could hear the faint hum of the lighting rig. You could hear someone inhale 2 rows back. Do you think, Colbert continued, that pain is what makes you such a compelling action hero? Is John Wick just you grieving? With a gun? Keanu stared at him. For a long moment he didn't speak. It wasn't hesitation. It was restraint, as if he were weighing not just how to answer, but whether the question deserved an answer at all. John Wick is a character, Keanu said finally. His voice was flat now, stripped of warmth. He is a construct. He is not me. But you channel it, Colbert insisted. He wasn't reading the room. He was chasing something else, something viral. When we see John Wick mourning his wife, we aren't just seeing acting, are we? We're seeing you. We're seeing Keanu Reeves mourning Jennifer. It was a low blow, a name that had not been spoken on live television in years. A grave Keanu had tended to privately for over 2 decades. Keanu turned his head away, gazing out into the darkness beyond the stage lights, as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. When he looked back, something had changed. The kindness, the famous gentleness, was still there, but it was cracking. Beneath it, something harder was emerging. Stephen, Keanu said, his voice steady but unmistakably firm. I don't think this is what we should be talking about. Why not? Colbert asked, spreading his hands. It's human, it's real, People love you because you're real. Why hide it? Why not share that burden? Keanu didn't flinch. I share my work, he said. My life, my memories, those are mine. Are they? Colbert challenged. You're a public figure. Your life belongs to the culture to some extent. That photo on the bench, that belongs to the internet now. Your grief, it's become a symbol. Doesn't that make you feel validated? Validated? Keanu repeated. The word sounded foreign in his mouth. Bitter, validated. How? Like your pain has a purpose, Colbert said. Like its content. The word hung in the air. Content. It lingered like a foul smell. Keanu Reeves is a man famous for his restraint. There are no viral videos of him screaming at paparazzi, no stories of tantrums or public meltdowns, but in that moment, something unmistakably shifted in his eyes. His pupils seemed to dilate, his body went perfectly still, not relaxed stillness, but rigid, the stillness of a predator before movement. My pain is not content, Stephen, Keanu said softly. It is if you monetize it, Colbert replied, convinced he was making a profound point. You put it in movies. We buy tickets. Transaction complete. I'm just asking you to be honest about the transaction. Colbert leaned back in his chair, satisfied. He thought he had cornered him, trapped him in logic. He hadn't realized he'd just pulled the pin on a grenade. Honest, Keanu repeated. He uncrossed his legs, placed both feet flat on the floor, leaned forward, mirroring Colbert's posture, closing the distance between them. And for the first time that night, Stephen Colbert looked unsure. The words landed with a quiet finality, slicing cleanly through the studio chatter. Stephen Colbert straightened slightly behind his desk, sensing the shift, but refusing to retreat. I think the audience deserves it. Colbert replied, turning outward, gesturing toward the crowd as if inviting them to stand with him. He paused, expecting applause. None came. The silence was immediate and unsettling. The audience shifted in their seats, a collective unease rippling through the room. They didn't feel entertained anymore. They felt complicit, like voyeurs watching the slow-motion inevitability of a car crash they didn't want to witness. They loved Keanu Reeves, they admired him, and they did not want to see him taken apart for sport. You are asking me, Keanu said, his voice changing, no longer soft, no longer conversational. It gained a sudden, terrifying clarity, the kind that makes every word feel sharpened by intention. If I use the death of my child to sell movie tickets. For a fraction of a second, barely perceptible but real, Colbert faltered. The phrasing was brutal, unavoidable, impossible to soften. I wouldn't put it that crudely, Colbert said quickly, hands lifting in reflexive defense. I'm asking if art can be therapy. No, Keanu cut in, clean and immediate. You asked if it was a transaction. Metaphorically, Colbert backpedaled, the word tumbling out as he sensed the danger, but couldn't stop his own momentum. I'm saying you've turned tragedy into a brand, and I'm asking, does the brand ever get heavy? A brand, Keanu repeated. He looked down at his hands, hands that had held dying friends, hands that had carried coffins, hands that had learned the precise weight of loss. You think my life is a brand? Colbert inhaled, falling back on the intellectual scaffolding that had protected him for years. We make brands out of everything, he said, his voice regaining confidence as he retreated into abstraction. It's commentary. Society does this. I'm not attacking you, Keanu. I'm analyzing the phenomenon of Keanu Reeves. The audience stiffened. You're the sad monk of Hollywood. Colbert continued. I'm just asking, is the monk real, or is he wearing the robes because it sells? That was it. The point of no return. Colbert had crossed from curiosity into accusation. He had suggested, publicly, under bright lights, that the most famously authentic man in the industry was performing his grief for profit. Keanu did not respond immediately. Instead, he looked toward the producer's table. He looked at the bandleader, John Baptiste, who had stopped smiling entirely and now stared down at his instrument, as if hoping it could shield him from what was coming. Then Keanu looked back at Stephen Colbert. For years, people had wondered what John Wick would look like if he existed in the real world. Not the assassin with a gun, but the man beneath it all. The man of focus, of discipline, of unbreakable will. In that moment the audience saw him. Keanu didn't shout, he didn't flip the desk, he didn't storm off the stage. He did something far more unnerving. He went completely, terrifyingly quiet. Stephen, Keanu said. The name didn't sound friendly, it sounded final. Yes, Colbert replied, his smirk thinning, confidence beginning to fray. Do you know why I take the subway? Keanu asked. The question seemed random. Disorienting, Colbert hesitated, searching for levity. Because you're down to earth. No, Keanu said calmly. I take it because when I sit there, no one is asking me to perform. No one is asking me to sell them something. We're just people, going home tired, hoping to make it to tomorrow. He paused, letting the words settle. You've forgotten what that feels like, haven't you? Colbert laughed nervously. I take the subway sometimes. No, Keanu replied. You take a photo on the subway. That's different. The audience gasped softly. Okay, shots fired, Colbert joked, trying desperately to lighten the moment. But let's not get distracted. We were talking about you. Keanu interrupted. You want to analyze. Let's analyze. He leaned forward. The distance between them shrank to something uncomfortable, intimate, inescapable. You invite people here, Keanu said, his voice soft, steady, and sharp as a blade. You offer them water, you make them smile, and then you search for the cracks, you look for the wound, and when you find it, you don't offer a bandage. He leaned in further. You stick your finger in it, and you twist. I'm an interviewer, Colbert snapped, his voice rising. I explore the truth, no, Keanu said, shaking his head slightly. You explore pain, because pain reacts, pain trends. The room was frozen now, no laughter, no applause. Even the cameras seemed hesitant, lingering too long on faces that didn't know where to look. You think grief is a costume, Keanu continued, something you can put on and take off, something marketable, but grief doesn't perform, it endures. He straightened slowly. I don't owe the world my wounds, he said, and I don't sell them, I carry them, quietly, because that's what surviving looks like. Colbert opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For the first time that night, he had nothing ready. And in that silence, the audience understood something profound. They weren't watching a celebrity interview anymore. They were watching a man reclaim his humanity, and late night television would never quite feel the same again.